sí, ya volvimos a hacer la unión, la unión. Estamos en huelga, queremos un contrato. Ahora, queremos contrato. ¿Cuándo? Ahora, queremos contrato. ¿Cuándo? Ahora, queremos contrato. ¿Cuándo? Ahora, queremos. ¿Cuándo? Ahora, queremos contrato. ¿Cuándo? Ahora, queremos.
Remington Alessi. I'm running for Harris County Sheriff. I wanted to talk to you today about unions. This is a point that's been raised because of the fact that I take part in a fair number of union demonstrations and am generally supportive of unions. Now, I've been asked, what about the problems with unions? And it seems to me that one can have nuanced opinions about a given topic without them necessarily being mutually exclusive. Now, what that essentially means is that I support some of the union activity. However, I do, like many Americans, feel very suspicious of some political entrenchment on the part of unions, and I don't feel that that's unreasonable, nor is it conflicting. And the way that I generally tend to explain this is that if the cause is just, I'll march next to anyone. And in the particular case of, say, today's union activity, where the Houston Janitors Union has gone on strike, I'm in support of that, because I tend to be of the opinion that if we can treat corporations like human beings, we should be able to treat human beings like human beings. And ultimately paying people a fair living wage for their work so that they're not below the poverty line seems more than fair to me. But anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about unions. Unions, as I said, do have their problems with political entrenchment, and I won't state otherwise at any point because of the fact that that's fairly well understood. I'm not going to name specific unions, but there are in fact unions that have become problems within our political system because of the fact that they've ultimately become decorative. They're there to legitimize the corporations who they end up working for instead of working for the people who support them. And there are other more complex issues, but the thing is, I do want to bring up something. When we find ourselves being highly critical of unions, it seems important to me to have a little bit of a history lesson. And I'm going to quote a little bit of Noam Chomsky. There's an explanation that he gives that kind of sums it up. Essentially, up until about the 1930s, it was common practice to break strikes by sending in various types of law enforcement and paramilitary with billy clubs to beat the hell out of people until they went home or to the hospital, and nobody cared which. In the 1930s, the public relations industry, as well as several corporations, got involved with trying to employ the scientific method for strike breaking. The idea was essentially that if you found a way to break strikes without violence, that it would be a little bit more expedient, specifically because of the fact that strike breaking with violence tended to upset people and radicalize people, and it delegitimized our existing system. So, what ended up being employed, and this may sound familiar, is what's oftentimes termed the Mohawk Valley formula for strike breaking. And what that was it was employed during some steelworker strikes in Ohio in the mid-30s. And the idea was to mobilize the public relations industry in order to get the community to no longer sympathize with strikers. Now, the general practice was to make it so that strikers were viewed as disrupting harmony. Meanwhile, you had these friendly corporations who were just out there trying to make everybody's lives better, and that these strikers were disrupting the harmony, they were driving up costs, and ultimately harming you, the citizen. Now, this may sound familiar, but moving on from there, what's very interesting is the fact that this was very effective, so effective that it's continued to be employed for the past 80 years. Specifically because if you mobilize the community against strikers, typically it's harder to form a strike. It's harder to develop support. Now, if we operate from the premise that unions are inherently evil, as has been portrayed by much of the elite media, it seems to me that we should probably get very angry at unions for these horrible contributions like the 40-hour work week or the 5-day work week, or paid vacation, that sort of thing. A lot of the labor rights that we take for granted come from grassroots union organization. But when we get into the issue of something being grassroots, there's a whole different topic. Grassroots essentially means that people, not large organizations, but people, feel strongly enough about an issue to mobilize in the streets and fight for it. And usually, if you look at how conflict averse most people are, it takes a lot. It has to be an important issue for people to really mobilize in the streets. So, if we look at these grassroots organizations, where they form, it seems to me that we should re-examine what we think of unions on the basis that a lot of unions started out, at least, as grassroots organizations. Now, of course, they have gotten politically entrenched, and again, that's something that I won't debate. But these grassroots organizations start with people like you. And for us to make any type of change, we have to band together. We cannot wait for politicians to eventually decide to do the right thing, because they're being paid not to. And as long as that process continues to occur, the only way that we can accomplish anything is through public pressure. And if that public pressure is put to work in order to end the drug war, so be it. If that public pressure is necessary in order to get janitors to be treated like human beings, just like their corporate employers are, so be it. And if that means mobilizing to end mass incarceration, so be it. What we need to do is we need to band together, because as long as we sit still and we don't band together in grassroots forms in the same ways that early unions did, we may as well write off our loss. We give up, go home, because it's done. Game over. You have lost. You have passed your problems to the next generation. And even though some of the problems that are inherent in this society are not necessarily caused by us, it's not an issue of blame. It's an issue of responsibility. Sometimes we need to take the responsibility to fix things even if we didn't break them ourselves. So, I'm Remington Alessi. I'm running for Harris County Sheriff, and I'd very much like your support.